Today, we're unpacking something genuinely fascinating. We're looking at how some of history's most impactful figures, from master engineers building literally impossible machines to terrifying killers stalking the shadows, somehow managed to permanently alter our world while completely erasing their own identities. We've got the artifacts, right? We've got the crime scenes, the masterpieces, but the names? Gone. Just evaporated. So let's dive right into the darkness and see what we can actually uncover.
All right, Section 1, the Unsolved Serial Killers. These are the killers who got away. We're opening the files on two of history's most terrifying phantoms, Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer.
Just look at the period between December 1968 and October 1969. The Zodiac struck with this calculated, terrifying speed. You've got attacks on teenagers on rural roads, an isolated couple at a lake where he actually wore this bizarre executioner's hood, and finally a taxi driver right in the heart of San Francisco. The contrast here is just staggering. We have intensely documented, horrifying physical violence happening side by side with a completely ghost-like identity. The guy even called the police to report his own crimes, yet he slipped through their fingers every single time.
Now, you'd probably think modern science would easily close these cases, right? But fascinatingly, dense forensic evidence actually worked backward to protect these phantoms. It systematically dismantled the cases against the absolute top suspects. Take the Ripper case. Aaron Kosminski was implicated by a shawl supposedly containing his DNA, but the chain of custody and contamination risks totally broke that claim. Then there's Montague John Druitt. His suicide neatly coincided with the end of the murders, but there was zero physical evidence actually tying him to the victims. And over in California, the Zodiac's prime suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, famously wore a watch with the Zodiac's crosshair symbol and literally talked about hunting people. But his fingerprints didn't match the cab driver's car, and his DNA was a complete mismatch for the stamps on the killer's letters.
And the Zodiac didn't just kill. He sent complex ciphers to newspapers demanding they be published. The number 340 represents his infamous 340-character cipher. It actually took a team of brilliant code breakers over 50 years to finally crack it in December of 2020. And what did they find after all that time? No name. Just a mocking message boasting that the police would never catch him. He used a mathematically complex code purely to say, hey, I'm still smarter than you. The darkness kept its secret perfectly.
Moving on to Section 2, the Phantom Master Authors. Genius without identity. We're leaving behind the physical violence now and entering the realm of pure, untraceable genius.
So, when it comes to foundational literature, who do we actually believe? With Homer, do we trust the mainstream Unitarian view of a single organizing genius who brilliantly structured these epic poems? Or do we go with the analyst theory that Homer is really just a label for a composite of oral traditions stitched together over centuries by multiple traveling bards? We see the exact same paradigm with Shakespeare. Do we trust the mainstream consensus that a Glover's son from Stratford somehow wrote these absolute masterpieces of aristocratic court life? Or do we entertain those alternative theories pointing to highly educated, hidden aristocrats like the Earl of Oxford? Or maybe even a faked death scenario involving the playwright Christopher Marlowe?
We really see this stark contrast when looking at the historical reality of the Shakespeare of Stratford. Keep in mind, this is a man whose plays showcase an incredibly precise knowledge of Italian geography, international diplomacy, complex law, yet his surviving paper trail is shockingly mundane. His worldly will famously and fiercely argued over furniture and his second-best bed, but it mentioned absolutely no books, no manuscripts, zero intellectual property. The irony is just almost unbelievable here. His own daughters appear to have been completely illiterate. And the only writing we have from his actual hand, 6 barely legible signatures that actually spell his own name differently almost every single time. But let's play devil's advocate for a second here. To be fair to the mainstream historical record, we really can't just ignore his contemporaries. Fellow playwright Ben Jonson, who knew him personally, explicitly praised Shakespeare by name in print in the 1623 First Folio. That really grounds this abstract, swirling debate in very concrete textual evidence. The plays exist, the First Folio exists, and a man named Shakespeare is directly credited by his peers. It just leaves us with this unsettling reality that the greatest writer in the English language left behind less personal documentation than your average minor merchant of his era.
Okay, Section 3, the Anonymous Ancient Engineers, Defying the Timeline.
Just imagine this. You're diving to the bottom of the Mediterranean in the year 1900. You're pulling up ancient marble statues, and suddenly you find a corroded lump of bronze that completely rewrites the entire history of human technology. So who built the world's oldest computer?
Meet the Antikythera mechanism. Dating back to roughly 100 BC, this device was likely connected to the tradition of the great astronomer Hipparchus on the island of Rhodes. Honestly, it is nothing less than an ancient analog computer. It featured over 30 interlocking gears with incredibly precise 1mm teeth. It could track planetary positions, predict eclipses, and even model the irregular orbital speed of the moon using a genius pin and slot mechanism. We wouldn't see anything this complex in Europe for another 14 centuries. Yet its master creator left absolutely no signature, no workshop mark, no instruction manual. The absolute greatest engineer of antiquity is completely anonymous.
We actually find a similar mystery buried in the sands of Egypt. The Great Sphinx of Giza lacks any contemporary construction records. There's no receipt, no grand declaration of its building. And this has sparked an intensely unresolved debate. On one side, mainstream Egyptologists rely on architectural context to date it to Pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BC, basically because it sits near his valley temple. But on the other side, geologists like Robert Schoch point out that the deep vertical fissures on the Sphinx's enclosure walls are highly characteristic of heavy rainfall erosion. The catch? Egypt hasn't seen that kind of prolonged, heavy rain since about 5000 BC, which pushes the potential construction date way back to 7000 BC or even older.
Adding to that enigma, forensic analysis highlights something you literally can't unsee once you notice it. The 66-foot-high human head is way too small for its 240-foot-long body. This strongly suggests that the limestone monument was originally carved as a massive, proportionately correct lion and then radically altered, recarved into a pharaoh's likeness by later generations. Meaning the face we see today isn't the original, and its very first builder remains the most famous unknown architect in the entire history of archaeology.
Section 4. The Architects of Erasure, scrubbed from history. Now let's look at what happens when the destruction is entirely intentional.
This haunting Bronze Age plea, "the ships of the enemy are already here," really humanizes an apocalyptic wave of destruction. Right around 1200 BC, the most powerful empires on Earth, like the Hittites and the Mycenaean Greeks, collapsed almost simultaneously. This unsent clay tablet, baked hard by the very fires that burned the city of Ugarit, speaks of the Sea Peoples. This was a terrifying confederation of raiders, possibly starving climate refugees, who just swept across the Mediterranean. They shattered the ancient world, yet they left absolutely no written records of their own. Their language, their origins, their ultimate fate, all completely lost to us. They exist solely in the terrified writings of the civilizations they annihilated.
Conversely, the erasure of Pharaoh Hatshepsut wasn't a sudden violent collapse brought on by outside invaders. She actually ruled Egypt prosperously for over 2 decades, building massive temples, expanding trade. But after her death, she was systematically wiped from the monuments. Now, for years, historians thought her stepson, Thutmose III, did it out of immediate furious revenge. But archaeological evidence shows a methodical 20-year delay into his sole reign before the chiseling even began. So it wasn't a crime of passion at all. It was a cold, calculated political move by anonymous officials acting very late in his reign to secure the male royal line and prevent future female pharaohs.
But here is the stunning conclusion to her attempted erasure. Even though her grand obelisks were walled up and her name chiseled away to just a blank scar on temple walls, modern science actually managed to outwit her ancient anonymous erasers. Back in 2007, a single tooth found in a wooden box bearing her name perfectly matched a gap in the upper jaw of an unidentified female mummy. So 3,000 years later, a CT scan and DNA analysis restored the greatest female pharaoh to her rightful place in history. Pretty incredible, right?
As we wrap up this explainer, we really must reckon with a profound realization. Whether they left behind brilliant dactylic hexameter verse, astronomically precise bronze gears, or the sheer, brutal destruction of Bronze Age empires, the incredible impacts of these figures survived, while their names permanently vanished. The artifacts are sitting right there in front of us, but the identities, they just evaporated into the fog.
So, I leave you with this final thought to ponder as you reflect on the incredible evidence we've covered today. If the builders of our oldest computers, the writers of our foundational texts, and the most terrifying killers can alter our world while remaining total ghosts, what else is the darkness hiding from us? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, and as always, stay curious.